The conference room on the 14th floor of Aldgate Solutions smelled like new carpet and cold ambition. Conrad Briley, 44 years old, a logistics coordinator who had spent 18 years moving freight through the Mid-Atlantic corridor, stood at the far end of a table that seated 12. Most of those seats were filled. The woman at the head of the table was not looking at him. She was looking at the folder in front of her, turning pages with the measured patience of someone who had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Her name was Margot Dunfield, 40 years old, Chief Executive Officer for 11 months. She had come from a consulting background, the kind that specialized in restructuring companies that had grown, in her words, organically inefficient. She wore her hair pulled back. She wore her opinions the same way. Conrad had been called into this meeting with 2 days' notice and no agenda. His manager, a quiet man named Ted, had sent the calendar invite with a subject line that said, only, "Nutrition planning." Conrad had not slept well the 2 nights before. He had left his daughter, Sadie, with the neighbor, Mrs. Alderman, who watched her on school mornings when Conrad had early shifts. Sadie was 7. She had asked him that morning if he was going to be late, and he had told her no, he'd be home by 4. She had believed him completely, the way children believe things before the world teaches them not to. Margot set down the folder. "We appreciate everything you've contributed," she said. 18 years is a significant run. Conrad said nothing. The company is moving toward automated dispatch coordination. The new platform launches in Q2. Your role as it currently exists will be eliminated. She said it the way weather forecasters say the word cold front, clinical, inevitable. There's a severance package, she continued. 12 weeks, benefits through end of quarter. HR will walk you through the documents this afternoon. Conrad looked around the room. The other faces were either studying the table or looking somewhere just past his left shoulder. No one made eye contact except a young woman near the window, maybe 26, who seemed genuinely uncomfortable and then looked away. "Is there anything in the new structure?" he asked. He kept his voice level. He had practiced keeping his voice level on the drive-in. Margot tilted her head slightly, not unkindly, but conclusively. "The new structure is quite lean. We're bringing in a team that's been trained specifically on the Vertex platform. It's a different skill set. A different skill set. 18 years of knowing every carrier relationship, every lane rate, every shipper who paid slow, and every warehouse manager who could be called at midnight when a load was stuck. That was, apparently, a different skill set than the one she needed." He drove home with the windows down even though it was February. He needed the cold. He picked up Sadie from Mrs. Alderman's at 3:50, 10 minutes early, and she looked up from a coloring book and said, "You said 4, as if his early arrival was a minor disappointment. He made dinner. He helped with homework. He read to her until she fell asleep. And then he sat at the kitchen table for a long time, in the quiet that single fathers know well. The particular quiet that arrives after a child is asleep, when there is no one to perform strength for, when the day can finally be what it actually was." He was finished. That's what the meeting had said, even if it hadn't used that word. He did not believe it, but he did not yet know why. The severance ran out in May. Conrad had spent those 12 weeks sending applications, attending 2 interviews that went nowhere, and doing what he always did when he couldn't sleep, driving, not aimlessly. He drove the freight corridors he knew, the industrial parks along Route 40, the distribution centers outside Frederick. He drove them the way a person rereads a book they love, for the comfort of the familiar. It was on one of those drives, on a Tuesday afternoon in late March, that he turned down Kilbourne Industrial Road, and saw the warehouse. He had passed it before. Everyone in freight had. It was a 68,000 square foot facility that had gone dark 2 years earlier, when a regional textiles distributor called Pentham Goods folded. The loading docks were sealed with plywood. The parking lot had weeds coming up through the asphalt cracks. A for sale sign had been out front for so long that the bottom of it had faded to white. Conrad pulled over. He sat there for a long time. He had been in hundreds of facilities like this one. He knew what they looked like when they were working. The rhythm of them, The dock doors cycling, the forklifts running their lanes, the sound of a well-run receiving department that never missed a cutoff. He could see it the way a contractor can see the house inside a ruin. He called the number on the sign. The listing agent, a man named Pryor, sounded surprised that anyone was calling. The asking price had dropped 3 times in 2 years. The building needed a new roof section over the East Bay. The sprinkler system required certification, and the electrical panel hadn't been inspected since the previous tenant left. Pryor listed these facts the way a doctor lists side effects, fast, and hoping you won't dwell on them. Conrad asked if he could walk the floor. He walked it 3 times. He measured the column spacing with a laser tool he borrowed from his brother-in-law. He stood in the center of the main bay and turned slowly, listening to the silence, reading the structure. The bones were good. The location was within 4 miles of 2 interstate connectors and a rail spur. The previous tenant had left the dock levelers behind. Someone had covered them with tarps that had now fused to the steel, but they were there. He went home and looked at his finances for a long time. Then he called his father. Wendell Briley was 71 years old and had spent 30 years running a small freight brokerage in western Pennsylvania before selling it and retiring to a house outside Hagerstown. He listened to Conrad for 20 minutes without interrupting. Then he said, "The building is the least of it. Cold chain," Conrad said. "Pharma distribution. Last mile for specialty medical. Nobody owns that lane right around the 270 corridor. Not at the regional level." There was a pause. "That's not an accident," his father said. "That lane has real compliance overhead." "I know the compliance overhead," Conrad said. "I've been filing the paperwork for 18 years. Another pause. Longer this time. "How much do you need?" his father asked. He was not asking casually. Wendell had sold the brokerage for enough to retire comfortably and leave something to his children. He was not a man who offered money easily. He was a man who offered it exactly once when it mattered. Conrad told him. "All right," his father said. "You'll pay me back when you're profitable. I don't want a percentage." The next 8 months were the hardest of Conrad's life, and he had already lived through some hard ones. He closed on the building in June. His brother-in-law, a contractor named Ray, took 2 weeks off his own work to help with the roof repair. They worked weekends. Sadie came on Saturdays and sat on an overturned milk crate near the office doorway, drawing in her sketchbook, occasionally walking the empty floor in her sneakers and watching the echo follow her footsteps. "Is this your company, Dad?" she asked one Saturday in July, standing in the center of the main bay with her arms out like she was measuring the space herself. "Not yet," Conrad told her. "Getting there." She nodded seriously, the way children nod when they've decided to be patient. He filed for his 3PL operating authority. He spent 6 weeks working through the temperature-controlled storage certification. He hired a compliance consultant named Farr, a retired FDA inspector who charged too much, and was worth it, to help him build out the cold chain protocols. He bought 2 used refrigerated trailer units from an auction in Pittsburgh and contracted a local diesel shop to bring them up to current spec. He could not afford employees yet. He ran the dock himself. He drove loads himself when he had to. He dropped Sadie at school at 7:15 and was at the facility by 7:45. He picked her up at 3:30. He came back to the facility after dinner, after she was asleep, and worked until midnight. He kept a photo of her on the corner of his desk, not for sentiment, as a reminder of what the hours were for. He named the company Ironside Cold Chain. He had not consulted anyone on the name. It came to him one night while he was doing compliance paperwork, and the facility was quiet except for the compressors cycling. Ironside. Like something built to last. The first clients were small. A pharmacy group outside Gaithersburg, a biotech startup that needed storage for clinical trial samples, an IV compounding pharmacy that had been using a national 3PL and was paying 3 times what Conrad charged for the same lane. They came one at a time. Conrad serviced each one as if it were the only account he had, because for a long time it was. He did not advertise. He did not have a sales team. He returned every call himself. He answered emails at 11 at night and at 5 in the morning. His reputation in the industry was 18 years old and still accurate, and it traveled faster than he expected. By the following spring, Ironside Cold Chain had 14 regular accounts, 6 employees, and a waiting list. Conrad was not on any lists. He was not at any conferences. He did not send press releases. He ran the operation the way he'd always run operations, quietly, correctly, without drama. He was in the facility on a Wednesday morning in April when his operations manager, a young woman named Petra, someone who'd asked to remain out of any published write-ups, sent him an email, flagging an inbound inquiry. A mid-size pharmaceutical distributor based out of Rockville was looking for a regional cold chain partner. The inquiry was routed through a broker, which was standard. Conrad looked at the account specifications. Volume was significant. The lane requirements matched exactly what Ironside ran. Temperature tolerances, documentation requirements, delivery windows. It was as if someone had written the RFP from his operating manual. He put together a proposal that night. Not a pitch deck. A proposal. Lane rates, compliance documentation, 3-year certificate history, reference letters from 4 current clients who had agreed to be contacted. He sent it the following morning. 4 days later, the broker called back. They want to move forward, he said. Whoever put this proposal together knew exactly what they were asking for. I put it together, Conrad said. The account manager wants a facility walk, the broker said. Standard due diligence. Tell them Thursday works. He did not know who was coming. The broker handled the scheduling. Conrad was at the facility at 7 that Thursday, doing what he always did. Running the morning doc check, reviewing temperature logs, walking the floor. The car that pulled into the lot at 9:15 was a black Audi. Conrad was standing near the doc office with a clipboard. He watched the car park. He watched the door open. He recognized her before she fully stood up. Margot Dunfield. She was dressed differently than she had been in the conference room. Not corporate armor now, just a blazer and dark trousers, the kind of outfit that said I'm here to evaluate, not to impress. She had a woman with her, younger, with a tablet, who Conrad assumed was an assistant or a compliance officer. Margot did not recognize him immediately. She was looking at the facility. Conrad watched her take it in. The clean lot, the functioning dock doors, the temperature monitoring display visible through the office window, the Ironside logo on the side of both trailers. He watched her read the building the way he had read it 2 years earlier, looking for what it could be. Then she looked at him. The recognition was not immediate. It came in stages. First his face, general familiarity. Then something more specific. Then the small change in her expression that people make when a memory arrives they weren't expecting. Mr. Briley, she said. Miss Dunfield, he said. Welcome to Ironside. She stood very still for a moment. The younger woman with the tablet looked between them, sensed something she didn't have context for. You built this, Margot said. It was not quite a question. Since June before last, he said. She looked at the facility again. The dock doors, the trailers, the Ironside sign. She was a woman who processed information quickly, and she was processing now. Shall I walk you through the operation? Conrad asked. She met his eyes. Something moved across her face. Not quite an apology. Not quite admiration. Something between the two that had no clean name. She said, I'd like that. He walked her through everything. He showed her the cold storage certification documents, the temperature monitoring system, which logged every deviation down to 1/10 of a degree, and sent automated alerts to 3 phones simultaneously. The compliance wall in the dock office, which held the current FDA registration, the carrier authority certificates, the state pharmaceutical handler permits, all of them current, all of them laminated, all of them accessible in 30 seconds. He showed her the client documentation binders. He explained the escalation protocol. He introduced her to the 2 dock supervisors on shift, both of whom had come from freight backgrounds and knew the operation without being told twice. He showed her the maintenance log for the refrigerated units, updated weekly, color-coded by severity. Margot took notes. The woman with the tablet took more. They asked detailed questions. Conrad answered all of them. Near the end of the walk, they passed the small office Conrad used as a base. The door was open. On the corner of the desk was Sadie's photo. Her school picture from the fall, her hair in 2 braids, her smile the kind that meant she hadn't been asked to smile. Margot paused. She looked at the photo without saying anything. "My daughter?" Conrad said. Margot nodded. She did not say anything for a moment. Then, "How old?" "8 now." She looked at the photo for another beat. Then she looked at the facility around her. The running operation. The certifications on the wall. The clean dock floor. She looked at it the way you look at something when you are recalculating. Conrad said nothing. He did not need to. The contract was signed 3 weeks later. It was the largest single account Ironside had landed. It would require adding a 3rd refrigerated unit and 2 additional staff. Conrad ran the numbers 4 times. He called his father, who listened, and said, "Good. Now don't get comfortable." He didn't. The account performed without incident through the first quarter. On-time delivery rate, 98.7%. Temperature excursion incidents, 0. Documentation compliance, complete. The account manager at the pharmaceutical distributor sent a note to the broker, saying it was the cleanest operation they'd worked with in 5 years. Word traveled. By the following fall, Ironside Cold Chain had 22 accounts and was running near capacity. Conrad hired a full-time operations manager and a compliance coordinator. He still answered his own calls. He still walked the dock every morning. He was sitting in the dock office one evening in October, working through the next quarter's capacity projections, when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. He answered anyway. It was a journalist from a regional logistics trade publication. She had heard about Ironside. She'd spoken to several clients. She wanted to write a profile. Conrad was quiet for a moment. He thought about the 18 years. The meeting on the 14th floor. The February drive down Kilbourne Industrial Road. The Saturday mornings with Sadie on her milk crate, drawing in her sketchbook while the echo followed her sneakers across the bay. "Sure," he said. "I can give you an hour." The article ran in December. It was titled, "How a Laid-Off Coordinator Built the Mid-Atlantic's Most Reliable Cold Chain." There was a photo of Conrad standing at the dock, the Ironside trailers visible behind him, the facility lit from inside. The article mentioned Aldgate Solutions once, briefly in context. It mentioned Margot Dunfield as the CEO, who had eliminated the logistics coordinator position as part of the company's automation push. It mentioned that Aldgate Solutions was now one of Ironside Cold Chain's 3 largest clients. It did not mention irony. It did not need to. Sadie was 9 by the time things had settled enough that Conrad could take a Saturday off without it costing something. They went to the Maryland Science Center in Baltimore, a thing she had been asking about for months. She ran from exhibit to exhibit and Conrad followed, slower, watching her. In the car on the way home she was quiet for a while, watching the highway through the window. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, is your company big now?" He thought about the 22 accounts, the 3 trailers, the 6 employees, the compliance wall. The quiet facility at 5 in the morning when the compressor cycled and everything was in order. "Growing," he said. She considered this with the seriousness she applied to most things. "Is that better than big?" He looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was watching the highway, not him, one hand resting against the window glass. He said, "I think it is." She nodded once, satisfied, and went back to watching the road. The exit signs passed overhead, one by one, and Conrad drove on through the last of the October light. The kind that comes in low and warm and makes everything it touches look like it was always worth building.